Welcome to part 2 of learning the basic scales and keys of music. If you haven't already, please check out part 1. You will definitely want some context on what scales and keys are all about. In this video, we'll be going more in depth with the circle of fourths and key signatures. In the last video, I introduced the circle of fourths as the most useful musical tool a musician can have when learning music theory. At the top of the circle, we have the key of C, which has no sharps or flats. Starting from C and moving clockwise, we ascend in fourths to build the circle of fourths. The next key after C would be F, then B flat, then E flat, then A flat, and then D flat. For now, we'll stop at D flat, and I'll explain why that is in a few minutes. As you move clockwise around the circle, one flat is added to each key. So if the key of C major has 0 flats, the key of F will have 1 flat, B flat will have 2 flats, E flat will have 3 flats, A flat will have 4 flats, and D flat major will have 5 flats. Not only does the circle of fourths help you to identify keys, but it also tells you which flats and sharps are in a key. Each of the flat keys will have all of the flats of the previous key, plus the next note in the circle of fourths. So in the key of F major, you will have all the flats from C major, which is 0, and the next note in the circle, which is B flat. So the key of F major has 1 flat, and that is B flat. The key of B flat major will have all of the flats of the previous key of F major, which is just B flat, and it will have the next note in the circle of fourths, E flat. So the key of B flat has 2 flats, B flat and E flat. Now, I'll give you 60 seconds to figure out which notes are in the keys of E flat and A flat major. If you can only do one of those in 60 seconds, that's perfectly fine. As with all things in music, it will take time to learn this. Okay, the key of E flat major has all of the flats from B flat, which is B flat and E flat, and the next note in the circle of fourths, which is A flat. So the key of E flat major has 3 flats, B flat, E flat, and A flat. The key of A flat major has all of the flats from E flat major, as well as the next note in the circle of fourths, D flat. A flat major has 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. Using this method, we can also figure out the flats in the key of D flat major. The key of D flat major has 5 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. G flat is a perfect fourth above D, so we know that G flat would be the 5th flat in the key of D flat major. If this seems like a lot to think about, don't worry. Eventually with practice, you will end up memorizing which notes are flat in each of the flat keys. You can practice this more at a website I've linked in the description. Now, why did I stop at D flat when talking about the circle of fourths earlier? This is because of the way scales and keys are constructed along with enharmonics in music theory. This explanation has to deal with a pretty advanced concept in music theory known as theoretical keys. While I won't be covering this topic until a much later video, I will briefly explain how this works. If we continue to go up a perfect fourth and continue to add flats all the way around the circle of fourths until we get back to C, the notes in the circle of fourths would be C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, F flat, B double flat, E double flat, A double flat, and D double flat. If this pattern was how the circle really was, D double flat major would have 12 flats. Now, even if you don't understand any of that, 12 flats sounds like a lot, right? Trust me, no musician would ever want to read music in the key of D double flat major. Because we don't want to make musicians deal with all that, once we get to D flat on the circle of fourths, instead of G flat major, we typically switch to its enharmonic of F sharp major, as it is much easier to read. Now, some musicians do prefer to think in G flat major instead of F sharp major, and auditorily they will sound the same, so the circle of fourths will usually display both F sharp and G flat. Now that we are in the sharp keys, we can continue to fill in the circle of fourths. From F sharp, the rest of the notes in the circle of fourths going clockwise will continue to ascend in fourths. The remaining notes in the circle of fourths are F sharp, B, E, A, D, G, and back to C. Now, we discussed how to figure out the flats in the flat keys, but how do you figure out the sharps in the sharp keys? This is a bit more complicated and requires more memorization than it does for the flat keys. Let's start with C again, but this time we'll move counterclockwise on the circle of fourths. Similarly to the flat keys, each movement from C will add one sharp to the key. So C major will have 0 sharps, G major will have 1 sharp, D major will have 2 sharps, A major will have 3 sharps, E major 4, B major 5, and F sharp major will have 6 sharps. To figure out which notes are sharp in the sharp keys, you start with the tonic and go down 1 letter. That letter is sharp. In the key of G major, 1 letter below G is F. So in the key of G major, the 1 sharp is F sharp. Just like the flat keys, each sharp key will have all of the sharps that the previous key has in addition to the letter that comes before the tonic. The key of D major has 2 sharps according to the circle of fourths. So it has all the sharps of G major, which is just F sharp, and then the note that is 1 letter before the tonic of D, which is C, will also be sharp. So in the key of D major, the 2 sharps are F sharp and C sharp. In the next 60 seconds, try to figure out what notes are sharp in the keys of A and E major. Again, if you're only able to do one, or if you can't figure out any of them, that's okay. I'll provide some practice resources in the description to help you. So the key of A major has 3 sharps, since it is the 3rd letter on the sharp side of the circle of fourths. The previous key of D major has F sharp and C sharp, and the letter before A is G, so the 3rd sharp is G sharp. The 3 sharps in the key of A major are F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. With that knowledge, we know that the 4 sharp key of E major has F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, as well as D sharp, the letter that precedes E in the musical alphabet. This applies to the keys of B major and F sharp major as well. The sharp notes in B major are F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp, and the sharp notes in F sharp major are F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, and E sharp. In a previous video, I discussed E sharp, B sharp, C flat, and F flat, and how they were not commonly used due to their enharmonics being easier to read. Unfortunately, in the key of F sharp major, as well as its enharmonic key of G flat major, this cannot be avoided, as F sharp major contains E sharp, which is the same as F natural, and G flat major contains C flat, which is the same as B natural. Since the rule of scales states that 1 octave of a scale contains all 7 letters, ascending from the root with no repeating of the letters, we can't use the enharmonics F and B, as their letters are already present in the scales. Due to this, it is very uncommon that a composer will write in F sharp or G flat major. Just like with the flat keys, in time, you'll be able to have the notes in the sharp keys memorized. All it takes is practice. Before we continue, here is an updated circle of fourths that shows everything we've talked about in the first 2 parts of scales and keys. Now, it's time to talk about key signatures. With all of these different keys, writing in every sharp and every flat for each of them takes up a lot of space in the sheet music and makes the music more difficult to read for the musicians performing it. To make the music easier to read and understand, composers will use what are called key signatures. Key signatures appear at the beginning of a piece of music along with the clef and the time signature, and they tell the musician what key the piece of music they're about to play is in. Key signatures can also be found in the middle of a piece of music when a composer is switching keys for an extended amount of time. When reading a key signature, all of the notated sharps or flats are to be played as such without the use of accidentals throughout a piece of music. Key signatures follow a pattern and are slightly different depending on which clef you are reading. This is the key of C sharp major. C sharp major is an uncommon key as its enharmonic is D flat major, which has less accidentals. C sharp major is the only major key to have all 7 sharps, making it a perfect example to explain key signatures. As for flat keys, I'll be using C flat as an example key. Although C flat doesn't really exist, its theoretical key signature would have all 7 possible flat notes. There are 2 ways to read key signatures. You can either count the amount of sharps or flats in the key signature, or you can read the note names where the accidentals are placed. Key signatures follow a pattern known as the order of sharps or the order of flats. This is similar to the circle of fourths, as every natural note is present in the order. The order of sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, and B. The order of flats is simply the order of sharps but in reverse. B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. Memorizing this order will be very helpful in being able to read key signatures quickly. Now, what is the purpose of the order of sharps and the order of flats? All key signatures will display their accidentals in their order. For example, the key of E major has 4 sharps, so when looking at the key signature of E major, the sharps will be placed in the following order of sharps. The first 4 sharps in the order of sharps are F, C, G, and D. So in the key of E major, the key signature will display F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and then D sharp. The same applies to flat keys. The key of E flat major has 3 flats in its key signature. The first 3 flats in the order of flats are B, E, and A. So in the key of E flat major, the key signature will display B flat, E flat, and then A flat. While I was explaining the order of sharps and flats, you may have already figured out the other way to identify key signatures. When looking at a key signature, the sharps or flats are placed on the line or space associated with the note that is being altered. So in the key of G major, all Fs will be played as F sharps without the use of accidentals, since F sharp is already in the key signature. If a composer would like an F natural to be played, they will use a natural sign. These work the same way sharp and flat accidentals do. In G major, an F with a natural sign will be played as natural until the end of the measure, then the F will return to F sharp in the next measure, unless the composer writes another F natural. The display of the sharp accidentals starts with the F sharp that is located inside of the staff, then moves to the closest note that continues the order of sharps. The same applies to flat key signatures, only starting with B flat instead of F sharp. Now let's practice reading and identifying key signatures. I will show you 6 different key signatures in both treble clef and bass clef, and you'll have 20 seconds to identify which notes are altered and what key is being shown. I will also include some examples that simply state how many sharps or flats are in a key. Hopefully, you got at least a couple of those, but if not, that's okay. I will link some more practice resources in the description. That's everything we'll cover in this video. In the third and final part of Scales and Keys, I will introduce and review the rest of the major scales. I will also review and bring together the ideas of keys, the circle of fourths, and the order of sharps and flats. If you thought this video was helpful, or even if you just enjoyed it, please consider giving the video a like. And if you want to see more music theory content like this, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for all of your support on these music theory videos. I have many topics I'd like to share with you all in the future, and I'll see you in part 3.